Welcome to Life Chats with Friends. I'm your host, Antonio Stevens, here to explore the untamed, unpredictable nature of being human, embracing the chaos, and dancing with the unexpected. Welcome to the show, Bucky. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. It is a nice, beautiful weekend, very fall and sunny. I'm enjoying it a lot. Yeah.
Yes, and we had a beautiful nature walk yesterday, which I'm so
nice.
grateful for. Time well spent.
Yeah, it was really great time well spent. Just being out there, a little bit removed from everything, just listening, some deep community and communion, walking through the woods. There's nothing more healing than that sometimes. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I am so excited to have you on the show today. Finally, this has been in the making for some time now. I really value and appreciate your perspective, and I feel like and hope that there is a lot that the audience will be able to take away from what we will share today. Before I get into that, I would love to very quickly introduce you. So for everyone listening, Bucky, our guest, he is a beacon of wisdom and positivity, always ready to lend an empathetic ear and offer valuable insights. Bucky is a health and wellness guide who focuses on providing folks with a variety of tools that allow them to explore and navigate their own definition of physical, spiritual, and nutritional health. Bucky, once again, welcome to the show. To set us up, so what we'll look to talk about today is something that affects many of us, all of us in different ways, shapes, and forms, but it's really looking at how we go about tackling the unpredictable nature of life, the darker sides, shadows, if you would like to call them that, of life. And it's really doing so through vulnerability and then being able to leverage that to show up as your most authentic self possible, getting closer to self.
It's an interesting topic. It's really interesting. In our conversations prior to this, I was thinking about this morning, and I was just like, of all the topics Antonio could come to want to talk about with me is vulnerability. And I think that's because in our discussions, they have been very vulnerable. And we've really gone in and laughed, and I think you've seen me cry, and that we could be that for each other in a very quick amount of time, I think probably brought us to this space to be able to talk about it in a way and sort of, to your point, sort of demystify that sort of just everything around vulnerability being either weakness or heaviness or negative, and just framing it in a different way. So I'm excited for the discussion.
Yes. Yeah. And how would you define this? What does this mean to you? What is your relationship to vulnerability and leading and living that as a part of your lifestyle?
Yeah, I think I alluded to this before somewhere when we've been talking, but I felt like when I was really young, as a child, I was always very sensitive, and I was always very emotional. I wore my heart on my sleeve. So if I was super happy, I expressed it very outwardly. Anger, when I was mad, I was really mad. When I was anxious, I showed that I was anxious. I said it. And so for me, that was just like being a child who had a little bit more empathy. And, in our world now, we like to say I'm an empath. I necessarily don't love that because we all have empathy in us. But I think I've had it to a greater degree. And then sort of self-labeled as an empath, and then in sort of the male label of my body, sort of how the external world sees me, is that I was expressing all of that, and the world was saying, no, you shouldn't do that. As a male, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be sensitive. You shouldn't be anxious. Please don't cry too much in front of other people. Don't be overly happy, because then that person is going to think you're crazy if you're excited and everyone else is not. And that really concerned me. And so I was sort of like, let's do some work here that, and so I've done lots of, part of my education was in emotional and creative intelligence. My master's degree, that's what I studied. And so I really have done some work my whole life of saying, if this is a part of who you are, then express it more. But it's a journey to get to that particular place. And so that's sort of my backstory to that. Yeah.
And you shared on the walk yesterday, doing your work and being able to recognize that early, like what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, I mean, one of those things was therapy, just going to a therapist and not really able to label or identify or know, but then a therapist saying, hey, this is really what you're going through. And I'm glad you're here and we can navigate it together. So at an early age, identifying that I needed a third party, someone else to help me navigate it was really helpful for me. And then I think having a good set of friends in college where I felt that like I could express it fully. And I was surrounded by a really great group of theater people who were charismatic and outgoing, but at the same time saying, hey, I'm stressed out. And I'm like, oh, me too. And so I think having a group that wasn't afraid to express their feelings made me feel so good. Like, oh, I'm a sensitive, expressive person, but so are all these other people too. And so it made me more comfortable as I got older to say, this is how I am as a person. I'm embracing it instead of saying it's negative or weak when it doesn't have to be any of that at all. And so it was great that I had those two things when I was younger.
And I think the one thing or one of the key things that I took away from this shared experience on this walk, on this hike with our other friend was in the act of sharing our stories and past traumas and our lived experiences, it was recognizing that we are actually all more similar and alike than we think we are different. And so as we think about vulnerability, the more you get to do that or get in the practice of doing that, it's a little bit easier to get past and work through the things that may seem detrimental or like, oh my gosh, like to reveal this to the world would be like damaging to me and my well-being.
Right. And I mean, and to go a little bit further than that, on the walk, we talked about some pretty intense things in our thing. But did you notice as we were walking and having conversation, because one person felt very comfortable in that environment, and so then I felt uncomfortable and shared my story and my truth, and you felt comfortable. And these were all very heavy things that we sort of like went through growing up. And I think that's the very first part of the reframing of vulnerability. The work that needs to be done is you're getting together and you're saying it. I always say lead by example. Like, hey, I am stressed out in my life and this is why I'm stressed out. I want everybody to know. And I think what often happens if it's people who are caring or have been through it, what you get in return is I've been there too. And I'm here for you because I understand it. And let me tell you how I navigated. It may help you, it may not help you. But that's such a better positive feeling to have, or an outcome, just saying I'm vulnerable and I'm anxious and I'm going to hold it in. I'm going to be angry and mad. And now I'm going to be mad at you and the rest of the world because I feel like I can't express it. Just a better way to begin. And the first thing is by saying it out to someone.
Totally. And I think, the definition that comes to mind is story stewardship. So it's first finding like who are the right people that have earned the right to be a steward of your story. But the more people that become stewards of our story, that's us getting closer to self by being able to remove this veil of separateness with humanity.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, we talked about Maya Angelou yesterday and her sort of work and recognition of that, like who earns the right to be in your space. And just that takes work, You know what uplifts you. You know what makes you feel good. You know who you can be vulnerable around. But the moment someone comes into your space and you're in a joyous place and they're in a negative space, you have every right to be like, no,
Not today.
Not today. This is not
today,
mine. And really, and you know, the example, I think there's an example out here of saying, you know, she invited people to her house. They're all standing there in a group. This person comes up and starts talking very negatively about someone that she cared very much about. And she just went up to the person and said, "You need to leave my house."
Is this your bag? Is
yeah,
this your
exactly.
coat? There's the door.
There it is. Goodbye. We're here to have joy and good
Yep.
conversation. We're not here to talk negatively about people. And there was no questioning that, right? That just became a part of her belief system. But I think that speaks to the work that you have to do in it, right? To know what your boundaries are, know where it's like, oh, it can make me feel anxious, but no, it's not making me feel good as a person. There's a difference in the line, right?
All right, Bucky, talk to me. How would you define vulnerability in its most like simplest form?
Yeah, we also talked about this a bit yesterday in speaking about vulnerability, and I think its association often is if you're vulnerable, you're weak. And I just feel like we need to reframe the definition of it. And I'm a qualitative researcher. You know, I just mentioned this in the piece before, and I've really studied a lot of creative emotional intelligence and asking people sort of the why question. It's less analytical, but it's about have an understanding of something. And this is what Brene Brown did when researching vulnerability. A lot of questions and observing people and having an understanding of that. And I think her definition that came out about 10 or 11 years ago with a counterpart of hers, and it's three. It's three parts of the definition of vulnerability. And the first is courage to be imperfect. And that is such an important piece of that because when we go to make a choice, it's never 100%. Like rarely when a person's like, yes, that is it. It landed at exactly 100%. The way I wanted it to be is the outcome. We rarely get that. Sometimes we get 50 or 60% that make us feel good enough about making the decision. But the rest of that is imperfect, right? And we're all doing that all of the time. So when you do make decisions or have big actions and they're not perfect, you should really have some sort of courage to be like, that's okay. I'm imperfect and that's how it is, and I'm going to mess up and I'm going to screw up, and saying, oh no, it didn't go as planned. I regret my decision, right? You're going down to the negative place there. And we also talked about this a little bit too. It's that, can you start putting in, you know, courage, the word courage, in front of whatever you're feeling? Because I think we often attach whatever the feeling is, happiness, sadness, whatever, there's something negative about that. And so what if you have the courage to be angry? Well, what would that look like if you were really angry, right? Like our tendency, I think, specifically in that emotion is like, we're angry and like, let me go away from everyone and let me bury it or try to move on from it. Well, what if you had the courage to stay angry for a little bit?
Feel it.
Yeah, like what is the anger? What is the anger teaching you? Why did this particular, like sit in it? This thing made me so angry because why? Is maybe it didn't, you know, align with your core values and you're just tired after a period of time accepting it anymore. Let it teach you something. Have the courage, and whatever the feeling is, if you're happy, you ride the happiness and stay in it as long as you possibly can, but sit in it to say, what brought me to this happiness and how can I go back to that more often, right? And so that, to me, just that one part, reframing that sort of imperfectness to having the courage in whatever feeling is to feel it and let it be, rather than trying to be so like, it's bad, I shouldn't be, let me move on from it. No. Yeah.
I love that. And building on that, so similar to you in this definition, that's my first, I guess, robust exploration of vulnerability was actually with Brene Brown's work. But in my, I guess, still relatively recent exploration
Yeah.
of self and kind of coming out at a macro level. Vulnerability to me, on top of that, also means like being able to tap into the intuitive nature of our essence, and can you have the courage to listen to that and express and operate as a vessel, or as the vessel of truth. um, and it's a practice. It's scary, it's messy, it's managing your mind, it's managing your thoughts, it's being able to sit with your emotions, and it's being able to figure out who are the right people in and around you, in your community, at work, personally, family, that you can go to and be like, hey, like, this is my experience. Yeah. And I have a friend like this, and we get on the phone, her name's Goldie, and it's like, what are you learning? Here's what I'm learning. And it's like, it's going beyond the surface, and it's like, okay, what's happening down here?
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at is sort of the second part of her definition with is the authenticity to be yourself, and the work that it takes to be yourself and to show up as yourself. You know, the example I give to that is here in DC. This is a very generalized example, but sort of you note it is a very politically consultant, lawyer-driven sort of city. And what that does then is the way you dress has to be a certain way. Polo shirt and khakis and suits, and that is the custom. And so then what you end up doing, right? Oh, we're going to a happy hour, or we're going to this event. And what's your choice of clothing? You conform. So in your head, you're like, no, I'm not going to show up in this bright thing, or this like wild color, right? Or I'm not going to wear all my jewelry or necklace. Let me just go in this bland khaki pant and polo shirt to fit in with everyone. So you're modifying your authenticity in that way. And beyond that, when you're in that environment, I always say no one's looking at your clothes. They want to see what the person is. You know, what is your political prowess? How much do you know? Can you speak to a conversation? Do you have a point of view? That dress sort of goes away, but we allow that thing, that very small, simple thing, just as our attire, to squash some part of our authenticity that is not true to us, right? And so that's work to say, you know what, I'm going to show up to this thing not wearing a polo shirt, exactly, or a button-down shirt. This happened to me a few weeks ago. I'll give you an example. So I feel like, and we talked about this a little bit, I don't always show up as masculine or feminine. It's just like whatever the mood calls for today, that's how I show up. And I let my dress indicate that now. And so it was yoga a few weeks ago, and I wore like a very flowy dress with these like spaghetti straps, and it was like the whole way down. And it was, I could tell the yoga students were not accustomed to seeing me like that. And I had like really big long earrings on, because that was just, I just felt sort of like flowy and nature, and I was like loving it. And the students were not. And I say that because I had to absorb that. I'm in my truth, and this is how I'm feeling today. But my students, it's rubbing them the wrong way because they're
that's
used
on them.
Exactly,
not on
exactly.
you.
And so it's on them to sort of process and learn. But you still have to show up in a space recognizing it's not always going to turn out to be happy for you. I could feel the uncomfortableness, and I had to live with it a little bit. And like, okay, this is going to happen. And that's, you have to go back in your vulnerability and talk about it. I showed up in my authentic self, and it really made people feel uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
And then over time, you get more comfortable with not caring about that. Like, oh, I showed up and I had a great time, and I didn't care if they were uncomfortable. There's a little bit of work in that, in the recognition of that. Yeah. And I think that's a great same thing. It's that is that second part of her definition, in that it takes work to be your authentic self and to show up as that all of the time. It just doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it took for me years to show up teaching yoga class in a dress or earrings or something flowy. It didn't happen overnight. It's work to that. But it can be done, and you're going to feel far better afterwards. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I 100% echo that. I feel like I'm in that on a daily basis, working to defy the mold, or not working to defy the mold, expressing and defying the mold, having the courage to continue pouring into things like this and other things that I'm really passionate about, and showing up 110% every single day. And I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, it is what it is. Like, this is what's calling to me, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And there's no destination in mind. It just feels right.
Yeah. And every time there's a learning, right? Every time you do this, right? And that's the beautiful part of the journey.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that sort of third part, so, we talked about the first, having some sort of courage to be imperfect and be a little messy. And then there's that part of working at the authenticity of yourself and what you bring to the table. And so that can be a lot of work. Like, I'm messy and I'm perfect and I feel a way about it, and I wore this and someone didn't like it. And as you're navigating that, the third part to me is compassion. You got to have compassion for yourself and others while you're going through it, because they're learning something new about you, or maybe something they didn't know or that they don't like all of a sudden. You're learning how to stand in it, be okay with other people, like, have some compassion. If you need a day, okay, this is a lot for me, I need to chill out and just be in bed, right? Have some compassion for yourself and others.
Yeah. All right. So earlier you had mentioned, or kind of brought to the surface, that many people oftentimes see vulnerability as a weakness. Are there any examples or stories that, or a story that you have in mind, or that comes to mind, where you were able to be vulnerable and it actually ended up being, a positive experience?
Yeah, I have a few. But going back to that, I frame this as we all learn differently, right? And so when you're learning to be vulnerable or express your emotions, I always think it's important that we have different tools. And I think primarily we learn through our senses, where someone can really learn through hearing or music does not work for the next person. Maybe they need some sort of visual sort of guide or exercise or taste or touch. And so I often provide a lot of tools that sort of navigate that person and say, oh, this is the avenue that really works for you. Sound really works for you. And so let's do these particular exercise in regards to sound to get you to a place where you can explore that emotion, feel good about it, be vulnerable about it, right? And so it's like having a toolkit. And I think that's the first place. So on my own journey, I sort of had to learn that for myself too. But I'll give you a more recent example. I'm blessed to have a really great group of friends. And often when we're together, it's at some event, a birthday, a housewarming. It's a lot of dancing, right? EDM music we love. And so a lot of the time we're in a big social group and we're sharing, and it's communal, but we don't often get underneath the surface. And there had been a month or so where we were all, when I saw individually the person, we were going through some things. There's work stuff that comes up and health stuff that comes up and relationships, and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
And so this is the same as me, sort of leading by example, and you doing it, expressing it out to the world is the first step in being okay with your vulnerability. So one of the guys in the group was just like, yeah, I think we should do a pizza party. And I was like, this is a great suggestion, but guys, then you'll come over and have a good time. And I knew going in before that I would facilitate the discussion and what we were going to talk about. And so we're all there, and I was like, guys, I just have a question, and that is, how are you really feeling today? And I was like, don't tell me some surface sort of thing. I want us to just go around in the circle one at a time and say, how are you really doing today? And that exercise was, you could tell that at the beginning there was some hesitation into how much was sharing. And this was the same thing. The first person went and the second, and we got the whole way around the group. And there was this sense of like, wow, we're hurting and we're going through it together. And we're struggling, but in together. And what beautifully happened, they kept on going. I didn't say a single word. I was sharing sort of what I had been going through, sort of. I have like a neurological disorder that I'm like coming to terms with. And I felt like, wow, this is the first time I felt in a safe space to like let it out and really talk. And then we kept on going around the circle, and the conversation was far more in depth and really talking about, this is bothering me, it's why, I don't know how to process this, I feel good in this particular moment, this is making me feel good about it. And then the more in depth we got, there was more discussion. And the result of that particular like heavier discussion was, from that point forward, the guys have all been checking on each other. You doing okay? I'm checking in with you. And the question isn't surface anymore. When we're out like, oh, you good? We're dancing, haha. No, it's like, I've got some hugs. I've got to lean in there. You doing all right? Your week been okay? And so that has been a beautiful result of everyone just sitting down and saying, this is where I'm at. Here's my vulnerability. You have it. We all shared it together, and you feel safe about it. And now we're all checking on each other. That is like a beautiful outcome of allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
Yes. Yeah. And I hope, if nothing else, for people watching, if you take nothing else away from this, it's, again, and to Bucky's point in sharing that story, it's, we are more similar than we think we are in our experiences that we are having, or that we may be going through. And so there is comfort in community, knowing that you are not alone. There is comfort in having a shoulder to lean on and having a safe space to bring the heaviest shit you may think you have. Like, there's a good chance there's someone going through something heavier or something very similar to what you're going through, and help is there if you need it. And if it's not a friend group, then nothing substitutes professional help, whether that be a psychologist, therapist, etc. I guess to kind of wrap this specific question, or this question in particular, something that my therapist shared with me, as a seeker, if there are endless possibilities in this universe, in this thing we call life, how could you ever arrive? And that really got me to stop and think. It's like, oh, this learning process is never ending till the day you keel and like peace out from this physical plane.
I absolutely agree. It is all a journey. I mean, I really hesitate to say there's the destination at the end. Like, same thing with goals, with dreams, whatever you achieve them, you've arrived at the destiny, but you still have to go, you have to go on past that. You can't just be like, oh, I'm good, I'm just stuck here. That's a learning. The destination is still learning, and you move on, and you continue to move on. So I always think it's about the journey. Yeah.
Bucky, we have been talking for a while now, and I would love to invite you to engage us all in a practice of some sort, meditation practice, or a tip, tool, insight that we can all add to our toolboxes. And for anybody that is watching this or listening here in the district, in the DMV, at the end of the show, Bucky will tell us where he teaches, and please go and check out one of his classes. They are awesome.
Yeah. I said this, but we all learn in different ways. And so I think each person getting to a place of vulnerability or having access to a particular feeling and sitting with it, the journey may look different for me than it does you. And so a lot of the times I explore with people primarily through their senses what those tools are. So taste might work for someone to trigger a memory, sound, listening to a piece of music, visually looking at a piece of art or something on the wall. So just think about sort of our senses. And so I guide people in that way. And I often have a mindfulness part of all of my yoga classes, and I try to change it up because, once again, people learn differently, so I try to bring different activities and see what resonates with folks. And one that I really, really love is called the love and kindness exercise. It is not similar to what I told you about the music therapy, but it happens in a different way. So you take the first minute and you sit there, you close your eyes, and you visualize someone right in front of you, like 6 inches away. And I give cues like, what environment were you in? What does their nose look like? What do they smell like? Their hair. And so you're there, and that person you really love is really close to you, and you say a phrase. And one that often works is, I love you and see you exactly as you are. And so you close your eyes, you visualize the person that you love, and you say it for a minute to yourself. We totally reset. Eyes open, you reactivate. Second minute, you go back in. This one becomes much harder for people. You have to do that same thing with a person that you don't like so much, or is giving you a hard time in your life, or you have a broken relationship with that you're trying to heal. So same thing, you have to visualize them, there they are. They're hurting you, or it's broken, and you have to say that same kind thing to them. I love you and see you exactly as you are. It only gets better. I always loved the third one, and I have gotten so much from the third one in observing people from this. And the third person is yourself. In observance of that, of being the teacher and the guide, you even see folks' face changing as they have to realign with sitting with themselves. It's a very eye-opening, like, do you know what your nose looks like? Have you touched it? Do you like where it falls on your face? Do you see the beautiful intensity of the color of your eyes? That one is the third one. Having to say it to yourself, I think, is the most powerful and the hardest bit of the work. Because it's so easy to just move in life, talk to everyone, other people, but the self. And it's 1 minute of saying, I love you and see you exactly as you are to yourself. Tons of tears. I've got tons of tears from that. It's such a beautiful exercise to do, and it's called love and kindness, because that's what you're really saying to someone that you love out there, someone who is hurting you, to yourself. It's such a beautiful exercise to do.
It also puts you back in this place of personal power and control when you are able to, it's like not putting anything outside of your heart, self included.
Really, it's just a really great exercise.
All right, so time for some fun, exciting questions, more uplifting questions.
I'm excited for this.
So, Bucky, what's the first thing you do in the morning to set a positive tone for the day?
So I do 3 things. I mean, almost, I wouldn't say 100%, but every day has a very similar cadence. And the first is belly breathing. And so I'll show you an example of the belly breathing, a little harder on myself. But generally when we breathe, normally we breathe sort of up here into the heart, into the chest, and that's where we're comfortable breathing. And it is focusing the intention way down in the belly. And so I often place my hands at my belly and one at my heart, and then I think, push out my belly fully. And I call this drunk belly. So it's like you have a big drunk belly, and then you have to take your hand and push the breath back in. And so what happens is that the belly lifts, and then the ribs and the chest lift after. And then you scoop it all in. And this to me is just a very beautiful, grounding, calming breath. I do about 8 to 10 cycles of this, and then I wake up. And that's how I prefer to start my day. After that, My laptop is on my kitchen table. I go turn on NPR. I want to hear the news, what's happening in the day, and a cup of coffee. It is that sort of cycle is how I wake up in the morning. Yeah.
I love that. Can you share a book or a movie that has had a significant impact on your life?
Yeah, and so there are two of these. This one is the one you have here that I shared with you.
Yes.
I love that you have it on your stand. It's called Meditations on Self-Love by Larissa Mattingly. And why I love it so much is it's easy and accessible. I think often when meditating or exploring our feelings, we think it has to be a certain way. And this book really throws all of that out the window. It's small paragraphs, sometimes ask you a question, hey, or just think about this. It's really easy, digestible ways to get into meditation. And I love that it can be simple and it doesn't have to be overly complicated. And so this book is a very, very good example of getting into it in a nice way. Yeah.
It has been a key part, or has become a key part of my daily ritual practice as well. But yeah, reading one of these a day, one of the sections a day, and then going into the day with that thought and reflection. And oftentimes it's a reminder that it's not that serious.
Yeah, it's not that serious. Yeah, there's something beautiful and light about the whole book, right? Yeah.
Next question. One word that describes your approach to challenges.
Measured. So I really am very, very specific when it comes to a really big challenge in my life. I don't be like, oh, I'm just going to jump right in. Whatever the first thought that comes to my mind, let me handle the challenge and then go for it. No. I often do it in such a way that I feel like I use a little bit more of like my rationale or my intellect. It's like a pro-con list. Here's the left, here's the right. I go down the list. I weigh the options. After that, I let my emotions come in. Okay, how is this making me feel? How do I want to feel? And it's like a combination of both of those. Sometimes if I still feel like I don't have it, I will seek advice from my closest friends or external forces when I don't. And so it's a lot before I go through a big challenge. It's very measured and it takes time. Yeah.
I love that. If you could have dinner with one historical figure, who would it be and why?
Gosh, we've talked about this and you're probably tired of me talking about Maya Angelou, but she is the person that I would just love to have dinner with. She was such a force in her life. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but even her name is a name that she made up in her life, and I always think it's a fun story to share how she got to the name, because her real name is Marguerite Johnson. And her little brother had a lisp, and he couldn't say her name, so he just said "my," like you're mine, you belong to me. And then he also liked to read a lot, and so he really liked literature about Mayan Indians, and so it became Maya. And then she had a husband, and his name was Angelo, and so she took the name, and so then she just created Maya Angelou from the name, and we've got this just phenomenal human being. She is to me, the full expression of a life lived.
Well lived.
Well lived. I mean, she went through some shit and turned all of that into, I'm going to be a poet laureate. I'm going to be a writer, right? She was a dancer. She was a singer. She lectured all throughout the world. And so way to take your adversity and the heavy things that you go through and turn them into teaching and gifts. Like, that is a full expression of a life well lived, and I'm just so enamored by her being and what she gave to us in the earthly plane while she was here. Yeah.
Echo that.
Yeah.
And are you able to share with us a personal mantra that keeps you motivated?
Yes, this is Andre DeShields, talented Broadway actor, who has been in the business for 50-some years, I believe. Sorry, Andre, if I got the math wrong. But he won his first Tony Award at 73. And while he was accepting the Tony Award, he got up and gave some advice. And this was the quote he said: "Slowly is the fastest way to get where you want to be." And that rings so true to me. I think specifically as I get older, the slower I go, the better. I've learned so much from the journey and the steps, and not, the destination or what the dream is. It's everything along the way is the thing that's teaching you. Yeah, so we talked about it a few times during this, but I always want to help people have a toolkit, and that can look differently for everyone. And so this is sharing a little bit of my own toolkit. And so I write, I'm a writer as one of my hobbies, and sometimes I get stuck. I would never say writer's block, but I get stuck. And so a dear friend of mine, Drew, who is, one of my closest friends, I mentioned him yesterday, I can't wait for you to meet him, gave me a deck. It's called Best Self. And it is a written deck where you just pull a card, and then it's a prompt for you to write. And it has helped me so much in the writing process. But past that, the questions are really beautiful questions. And so it was you can do these in your own just reflection. I don't have to necessarily write it, but I will pull one out, think about it. Ooh, where is that sitting with what I'm currently feeling? Or some stuff that I hadn't thought about for a while, the question has brought up. And there are different sort of categories and sections in the box. There's random, there's love, there's family, there's about the world. And so I just pick one out and I reflect on it, and it's really helpful for me.
Awesome. What's the name of the deck?
It's called Best Self.
Okay, perfect.
You easily just Google it. You can get it from Amazon. It is a white and orange box. Such a helpful little deck. Yeah. And so I brought some.
Awesome.
And so I just picked out random cards. I didn't even think about them. And then you just get to pick. You just get to pick one.
All right. We'll go with the red one first.
Okay.
The category is relationships, and the question is, what conversation do you need to have today, and with whom?
Ooh.
Today, I feel like I had most of my conversations yesterday. Between the walk, the hike, and afterwards I called one of my best friends, who I consider soulmate as well, but how deep we can go in our lived experiences, even though they're so different, and then still being able to see each other and come back to oh, there you are. Cool. All right. But I would say probably my mom, just checking in and continuing to nurture our relationship.
Oh, amazing. You want me to do it to myself? No?
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So once again, because this is a writing deck, the first word is write about a time you walked away from a person or an opportunity. This is a good. I think the place that I go back to in walking away from an opportunity that sticks with me. I was in banking for 10 years, and I was a really young banker, and I was very successful. And I was 28 years old, and I was very unfortunate to be the head of our loss prevention division for a whole bunch of branches, and I had an assistant and the nice corner office and all of the things, and it was sort of at the height of my career, and I walked away. And I remember some of my boss and friends saying there was so much more opportunity because you're in this place and you could continue to grow. But it wasn't serving me. When everyone was telling me, you're so stupid for walking away from this and wanting to take more opportunities in banking and grow myself, because I felt at that particular point, I was working 60 or 70 hours a week. There was no self-care. It was I had to do this to prove to be successful. And at the end of that was to whom? To nobody.
Yeah.
And then it was about the stock price and how much you didn't lose and all of that. And I was just there is no value or intention for this in my life right now, and I just walked. I absolutely walked away and didn't take the opportunities that were supposed to come from that. And I'm so
Kudos
glad.
to you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I did. Yeah, that I didn't listen to everyone that was like, don't do it. But I walked away. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Bucky, where can people find you?
Yeah, there are so many of the platforms, but my real focus platform is Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram if you would like a wellness session or a meditation session or a mindfulness session. You can always directly message me on Instagram. And then here in the district, I teach at Yoga District at the Bloomingdale location every Friday night. It's a nice, great way to end the week. And then I live in Fort Totten, so I teach in One Life Fitness there as well. So if you're in that neighborhood, come on by and take a class. So you can always come take class with me or direct message me. I'm always available and respond in a timely fashion. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for the time and safe space shared today. And for all the insights that you were able to deliver to this audience and to me personally as well. I feel like every time we talk, I'm picking up new things.
Little nuggets.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
and it's the same for me. These last 2 days that we've had together have been so joyous and eye-opening and uplifting and wonderful. And we need to have more of this. And so thank you for bringing it to us and having a platform for it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone out there that continues to tune in. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. If you did enjoy this, please do go ahead and share this with someone else that you think may find value in this discussion. If you're watching this on YouTube, please click below to subscribe. Everything helps to grow the show. Thank you all.